Hey everyone, I'm Alice. I know it's been a while since I posted my last video, so today I'm going to be talking a little bit about something different, actually working while you're traveling. So recently, I just got back to the United States after spending about a year and a half in China, non-continuous. But before I came back, I spent a couple months in both Japan and China, just traveling around, having a great time. And what made this trip different from all of my other ones before was that I was actively trying to work while I was traveling. Now, this is something that I think a lot of people are trying to do, and the internet has made it much more possible to actually do that. One of the ways that people are doing this is by teaching online. And you can see by my signs back here that I do that as well. If you're interested in checking out the platform that I use, I'll leave a link in the description with my review of Palfish. But there are a lot of different ways to teach online, and I'm just going to be talking about teaching online in general while you're traveling. So the pros of this are obvious. While you travel, you get to earn some money, which is fantastic. You don't have to be in one physical location, so technically you could go anywhere in the world that you want to go, whether that's Europe, whether that's South America, Asia, Africa, literally anywhere. The other great thing is that the demand is pretty high, especially for English, and so you really don't need a lot of qualifications. A lot of people or a lot of companies do ask you to have some basic qualifications, for example, the TOEFL. But honestly, I started out with no qualifications at all, and there are tons of ways that you can find jobs without having any experience or any certificates at all. Now, what this video is mainly about is the cons of teaching online, because the pros are pretty obvious, and I think so many people have been talking about how great it is that they get to teach online all the time. One of the biggest things that is pretty obvious, but you may not think about it until you actually start teaching online, is the fact that teaching is time dependent. So this means that you have to be online or you have to be wherever at a certain time. Now, normally this might not be a big problem if you're just hanging out at home or teaching online just for some side income while you're living in your home country. But when you're traveling, this can be a huge challenge. So depending on where you go and where the students are that you're teaching, you may have to go home early, wake up super early, spend your entire morning or your entire night teaching. Or if you're super unlucky, maybe the teaching window is actually right during lunchtime, so you either have to go somewhere very quickly in the morning or come back very late at night. Now, of course, this depends on the students that you're teaching, but for a lot of the platforms that people use right now, the most popular ones being to teach students in China mostly, which means that if you're in Asia, that might work out for you because you just have to teach at night. But if you're traveling, for example, in North or South America, you're probably going to be getting up at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning to teach for 2 or 3 hours. That kind of schedule can really build up over time and make you incredibly tired. So this is something that you really need to think about in terms of what times your students are going to be available and when you're going to have to be home or at your hotel, wherever you're going to be teaching them. So another con, maybe sort of con, is that teaching online forces you to plan way ahead. So I kind of learned this the hard way because even though I was teaching Chinese students while I was in China or in Japan, which is only 1 hour difference, there were times when I wanted to see if I could go somewhere at night, see the night lights, or even go out for dinner or something like that. However, because students are mostly on, for example, from 6 to 9 p.m., usually if I had bookings, I would have to be back at my hotel or wherever by 6 to 9 p.m. So this really limited the time that I could go out and explore the city. So I ended up really only spending 2 or 3 nights out in each country. So this meant that I really wasn't seeing a whole other side of a country just because instead of seeing the nightlights, I was at home earning some money. So this is not a terrible thing, but in some platforms, students can book up to 3 weeks early. And if you open up your time schedule a little bit late, you might not get bookings at all. So this definitely reduces your travel spontaneity. Now, if you're somebody who plans out a lot anyways, that's totally great. But if you're someone who, like me, when I was traveling in Chile, I would literally arrive to the city and walk around until I found some place to live. So this really forced me to look way ahead and change my travel style entirely. The other thing is that you have to carry around your gear. So for some platforms, you might need your laptop. For some platforms, you might be using your phone. So depending on what you use, you're going to need to bring different things. Some companies require you to have signs in the background. If you're teaching kids, oftentimes you want to bring around stuffed animals or something that can kind of capture somebody's attention. You might need specific color shirts. You might need lights, especially for hotels. They tend to be really dark for some reason. If you need something else in your background, you're going to have to carry that around too. So if you're used to carrying around a lot of things, that's fantastic. For me, I like to carry around a small backpack, so this was definitely another adjustment. And one more thing, and this is also pretty obvious, but you must have a 100% reliable internet connection. Now, if your internet works 90% of the time, 90% of the time, everything is going to be great. But that 10% of the time, usually if you're traveling, that doesn't matter. But if you're teaching, that 10% of the time you can't access the internet, you're going to be racking up a ton of fees from not showing up late, having to leave early from your class for whatever reason, especially if you're traveling to countries that don't have reliable Wi-Fi, or if you're staying in a hotel that doesn't really provide fantastic Wi-Fi, you're gonna have to have data. And so it would be an added expense depending on where you are. Going off of that, the place that you live is really, really important. So your accommodation selection is crucial. For some hotels, that's totally fine, but depending on your budget and how much you're working or earning and spending in other things, this may be a trade-off. So for the most part, if you have a private room, you're going to be fine. But if you get a cheap private room, in some places, the noise, the ambient noise from the traffic or parties going on in hostel rooms around you or things like that, these are seriously going to impact your students' experience with you. If you have great students, maybe that won't be a problem. But if you have trial students, if you have new students, these really are going to make a bad impression for them. The other thing is, if you're traveling with other people, especially if they are also teachers, you're going to have to really think about how to figure things out, because if you're staying in the same room, it's okay if the other person doesn't care if you talk or if you wake up super early to teach or whatever. But if they do, if they're light sleepers, if they're teaching at the same time as you, then you really need to figure out how to put together all of your needs. The last point I want to point out is that teaching can take up a lot of energy, especially if you don't love teaching or if you just happen to have a really terrible student. Now, for me, teaching is not my absolute love. It's not the love of my life. And if I have some great students, I can enjoy myself a lot. But if I have terrible students, I'm going to be in a really bad mood. When you're traveling, this can totally affect your relationship with the people that you're traveling with, because most of the time you're going to be around them almost 24/7. And especially if you're sleeping late, waking up early, you're going to be super tired. You're not going to be able to really plan your travels that much. And if you're going to be really cranky on top of that, it can be a huge detriment to your travel experience. So to me, it's really beneficial to take off maybe 1 or 2 days during your travels every week. just so you can recharge and then also perhaps spend extra time on that single day to teach more, to work more, so you'll still earn the same amount, but you don't have to give up all of your energy or your travel experience just to do that. In terms of my own experience, while I was traveling in Japan and China, I made between $1,100 and $1,200 a month, US dollars. So it's not a whole lot, but for both of those countries, it was enough to definitely cover all of my expenses. Now, the thing that you do want to keep in mind is that for that amount, depending on where you are, it may cover your expenses or may not, but if you add on the flight expenses or anything else that you might have, it may put a pretty big financial strain on you. So during that time, I was teaching less than about 15 hours a week, so not a whole lot. But to me, if you teach any more than that, then you really need to make significant adjustments when it comes to your scheduling. So it may be that you actually do end up taking one day off a week, or you might take 2 days off and work a lot more on the other days, or you might just consider a super slow mode of travel. So it depends on you, but just to give you an idea, I was working about that much, and for the most part, financially, I was doing pretty well. So have you done this before? Have you taught online while you were traveling, or maybe while you're not traveling and now you're thinking about teaching to your travels? Let me know how it goes. Let me know if there are anything that I missed in this list that you have to think about. I'll definitely read the comments, and I'll see you again next time.